Are you a depressed cunt? Maybe your mom thinks you're actually fucking emo. Your friends actually think you're an Elliot Roger type. Now, if that sounds kind of like you, you might be Enneagram 4, which could possibly be a life-ending deadly disease. So often, obviously, the word envy gets thrown around whenever we are talking about Enneagram 4, but what the fuck is envy really? Are you envious some other chick has better tits than you? Maybe your dick is small, so you wish it would be bigger. Is that the envy we are talking about here? Frustration of seeing the world content. A world where you cannot fit in and you feel, damaged by it. You feel wronged. So disdaining happiness, romanticization of suffering, I'm a sad cunt, can be a part of envy. Often judging the mundane, judging the typical and judging the normal does happen, because they cannot live like that. They cannot be that way. Bunch of fucking special snowflakes, indeed. Enneagram trap, it would be authenticity. The Enneagram 4 is always in search of a symbol or even a person that they can identify with. Something that represents his little set nature. It's never done in the, realm of the present. Because of that, there's a huge sense of frustration. Now, the fixation of set counts would be melancholy. Now, the melancholy talks about the frustration with the present moment and the idealization of a happy future, generating in this individual a contempt for the mundane. It's often frustrating to kind of realize that the world is happy, but you're just a sad cunt. They don't feel happy because they're constantly idealizing something perfect, something good. Now, this way of seeing the world is, of course, extremely subjective, and it's not only subjective, but also it generates envy in this type. Because the world is content with what they have, and the 4-core isn't. Now, all 4s are envious. It's just how the envy manifests is how you tell the difference between the subtypes. Now, social 4, which is probably the archetypical set 4 that you're thinking of, the sad puppy that just has to keep fucking crying, completely and utterly depressed to core, and probably gone from this planet Earth by the time they're 25. So, is that a stereotype? Yes. Does it mean it's not true? No. They feel ashamed of their own existence. They tend to compare themselves to other people in a very negative way. In any hierarchical position they're going to be in, they will tend to see themselves as victims. They gather attention and they gather love by people feeling pity for them, by people recognizing their pain, by people acknowledging their existence and how painful it can be. So generally their mind is very creative, very idealistic. For set cons, they are also ingenious when it comes to their creativity. All of that imaginative nature and the creativeness, it also is caused by their introversion. They are very introspective and they tend to look inwards. They are dreamers to such extent that there is almost a severe disconnect, from the present and severe disconnect from their bodies. So they can be very altruistic and understanding people. Compassionate, very kind. Don't really think of SO4 as a person who's genuinely gonna fucking cry on TikTok to really get daddy's attention. It really is not gonna work that way, because that's more so a fucking caricature. They always appear very docile. The envy is absorbed and it embodies this subtype, where the hate and the anger and the suffering is towards themselves and their existence. The sexual 4, aka hate. Realistically, no one wants to be this fucking subtype. Can you imagine reading this shit and then finding out, your fucking subtype is called hate. And because you're such an envious cunt, you have to make everyone's lives fucking miserable. It is quite on par with, being an 8 and being called a fucking rapist by Naranjo himself. Sexual 1 liking his fucking sister's butt cheeks, that is really taken too far, and we should really look into Naranjo's inner workings and his fucking childhood, because I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something fucking seriously deranged in that motherfucker. Inferiority is hidden, and it's almost mixed into this projection of hatred. Their minds believe truly and think that they are, rejected by the world. They're misunderstood by others. So that causes them to rebel against that. They blame others, they criticize others to hide their own insecurities. All of that is done as a way of reaffirming their judgmental introjection. They are very intimate, right? And obviously, when they're at their worst, they need to control and degrade others in order to feel safe. In intimacy, they can be quite shameless, they can be quite quirky. But with people they don't really know well, they can be almost seen as quite timid, defensive. Of course, they can be very reactive and aggressive. Their defense is their offense, and that can get fucking personal real motherfucking quick. Envy here is externalized in order to protect them, where the hate, the anger, the suffering is projected on others. Lastly, we have the self-preservation for which would be called tenacity. The neurosis of envy here is seen as bad behavior. The envy towards the world is used almost as a motivator in order to improve, in order to get better. When she ain't that healthy, their tenacity can lead to masochism. And then a great example of this, in my opinion, is David motherfucking Goggins. Now, some of you teenagers would probably think, oh no, he's a Sigma male grind set, he's amazing. No, he's a coping set cunt who has such severe unhealthy case of SP4 that he really confuses self-development with fucking self-punishing, which is completely not the same fucking thing. But that is how you see this masochistic nature almost of complete endurance, no matter how much blood you have to piss. The suffering and the endurance of suffering is almost seen as something you should be proud of. Pain leads them to grow. They're more responsible than the other subtypes. Here the victimhood, right, is almost seen as unacceptable. The need of help can be almost humiliating. Like all of the other subtypes of 4, they're still quite creative and can be very spiritual, despite being seen as more physical and more down to earth. They idealize perfection and they try to achieve it through this non-objective fashion. They can be very modest and stoic. They don't like to victimize themselves or even show that, their internal struggles or their internal discontent. Here the envy is repressed, the hate is hidden, and it's used as a form of self-demand and self-criticism. So with the social 4, they're much more melancholic, right? The sadness and vulnerability is much more obvious here. Inferiority complex is really much more visible here. Now with sexual 4, they're more aggressive and hateful. The SX4 projects their hate on other people to kind of hate the fact that they hate themselves. Can demonstrate criticism, severe fucking criticism. Now with SP4, they're more stoic, more self-controlled, perfectionistic subtype. And the typical self-critic. The SP4 despises envy, which is why they internalize it. Inferiority here is almost used as a tool to get better, to improve. So that's it for today. I'm fucking out.